The Galactic Council possessed records that stretched back 3 million cycles. Within those vast archives of light wrecks and digital storage data, millions of star systems were cataloged, analyzed, and filed away under specific threat levels. Most systems were green, meaning they were safe for colonization or resource harvesting. Some were yellow, requiring caution due to extreme weather or volatile star activity. Only a tiny handful were marked with a dark, flashing crimson seal. The solar system, known locally as Sol, was one of those rare crimson sectors. For 12,000 cycles, a large digital beacon floated on the edge of the Sol system. It was a block of solid titanium alloy, humming with an ancient power core, broadcasting a message in 300 galactic languages. The message was simple: do not enter, do not exploit, do not contact. The inhabitants of the third planet are naturally unstable, structurally aggressive, and biologically locked into a permanent state of survival evolution. Leave them to the void. To the high command of the Vondrak Empire, however, warnings were nothing more than signs of weakness left behind by older, softer civilizations. The Vondrak were a species built for conquest. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in thick, gray chitinous armor plates that could deflect standard plasma fire. They had 4 upper limbs, each ending in razor-sharp claws, and eyes that saw perfectly in the dark. They had conquered 74 star systems in the last 3 centuries alone. They did not fear warnings. Grand Admiral Kalen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought, vengeance his primary eyes fixed on the massive view screen. Before him lay the outer boundary of the Sol system. The cold blue gas giant Neptune hung in the distance like a quiet jewel. "The beacon is still transmitting, Admiral," reported Subcommander Tross, his mandibles clicking in a rhythmic expression of mild boredom. "It has been broadcasting the same warning since the first era of Council expansion. Shall we terminate the transmission?" Kalen let out a low, rumbling growl from his deep chest. "No, leave it. When we have taken this system and turned its resources into fuel for our empire, the beacon will serve as a monument to our supremacy. It will tell the galaxy that what the Council feared, the Vondrak mastered. Tell me of the primitive inhabitants." Tross tapped a set of commands into his glowing data console. "The dominant species calls itself humanity. They are bipedal, soft-skinned, and possess no natural armor. Their bones are made of calcium, easily broken under heavy gravitational pressure. They lack any biological weapons such as venom or claws. They rely entirely on primitive mechanical tools and chemical-based energy systems. Our long-range scanners indicate they have occupied their home planet and have established small, fragile outposts on their moon and the 4th planet, which they call Mars." "An intellectual race?" Kalen asked, his voice dripping with casual disdain. "Hardly, Admiral," Tross replied, displaying a holographic map of Earth. "They have spent the majority of their recorded history killing one another over lines drawn in the dirt of their own world. Even now, with their limited space technology, they remain divided into competitive factions. They are fractured, weak, and completely unprepared for a coordinated orbital invasion." Kalen turned away from the view screen and walked toward the center of the command deck. The bridge of the Vengeance was an immense room, filled with dozens of crew members operating weapon stations, navigation arrays, and shield generators. Surrounding the flagship were 200 heavy cruisers, 50 troop transport carriers, and a massive supply fleet. It was an armada capable of breaking an entire sector. "The Galactic Council believes that because a species is violent, it must be dangerous," Kalen said, looking at his senior officers. "They do not understand that true strength comes from order, discipline, and superior technology. A Vatran primitive is still a primitive. They fight with passion, which makes them sloppy. We fight with calculation. Prepare the fleet to cross the boundary. We will bypass their outer planets and establish a blockade directly around their home world. We will demand their total surrender within 1 solar cycle. If they refuse, we will burn their cities from orbit and harvest the crust of their planet." "The invasion parameters are locked in, Admiral," Tross said. "Crossing the Sol boundary in 3, 2, 1. The fleet broke through the invisible line monitored by the ancient Council beacon. As the ships moved forward, the ambient radiation of the deep cosmos seemed to shift slightly. But the Vondrak instruments registered nothing out of the ordinary. They were confident. They were unstoppable. The Armada advanced past Uranus and Saturn, their massive thrusters leaving bright trails of ion plasma in the cold vacuum of space. Strangely, there were no defensive platforms, no automated orbital mines, no patrol ships. The outer system was completely silent, empty and dark. "It seems they do not even monitor their own borders," Tross remarked with a short laugh. "They are completely blind to our approach." "Do not let your guard down entirely," Kalen warned, though he shared his subordinate's confidence. Even a small animal will bite if you step on its nest. Keep the shields at 40% capacity to save energy for the orbital weapons. We will save our full power for the formal display of force. As the Vondrak fleet neared the asteroid belt that separated the outer gas giants from the inner rocky planets, the communication arrays on the Vengeance began to pick up signals. They were primitive radio frequencies, unencrypted and chaotic. The sounds of human voices, music, and data transmissions filled the audio monitors of the Vondrak bridge. They are broadcasting everything into open space, the communications officer reported. They have no concept of operational security. They are currently celebrating a local seasonal holiday on their northern hemisphere. They have no idea we are here. Excellent, Kalen said, his eyes narrowing. Signal the transport carriers to prepare the ground legions. I want our flag raised on their primary governmental structures before the planet completes half a rotation. Let them know that their long isolation from the galaxy has ended, and their time as servants has begun. The massive fleet sailed past the asteroid belt, heading directly for the pale blue dot that grew larger on their main viewing monitor. Earth looked peaceful from a distance. It was covered in white clouds, vast blue oceans, and green continents. It looked like a paradise waiting to be taken, an easy prize for the greatest military power in the quadrant. On the bridge of the Vengeance, every Vondrak warrior felt a sense of incoming victory. They had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. Arrive, terrify the locals, destroy their token resistance, and claim the world. They ignored the flashing red database files in their computers that contained the council warnings. They ignored the whispered legends of older species who claimed that Earth was a place where physical laws seemed to bend to human willpower. They saw only a soft, unprotected world. They moved closer, passing the orbit of Mars. The red planet was quiet, its small human research stations showing signs of life but no military activity. The humans there did not even attempt to flee. Target locked on the primary satellite of the third planet, Tross announced. We will enter low Earth orbit in standard planetary configuration within 2 standard hours. Grand Admiral Kalen smiled, showing rows of sharp yellow teeth. Commence the approach. Let us show these humans the true face of the universe. The fleet surged forward, closing the distance to Earth. But as the first scout ships crossed the orbital path of Earth's moon, something unexpected happened. The open radio transmissions that had been filling the Vondrak communication monitors suddenly stopped. The chaotic mix of human music, news, and digital chatter vanished in an instant, replaced by a deep, heavy silence. Admiral, the communications officer said, his voice dropping in tone. The signals, they have all gone dead at the source. The planet has gone completely silent. Kalen frowned. Did they lose power? No, sir. The energy signatures from the planet's surface are still active. They didn't lose power. They intentionally stopped broadcasting. Every single frequency across the entire globe went dark at the exact same millisecond. Before Kalen could process this piece of information, the navigation officer called out, Admiral, the scout ships. We have lost tracking on the forward vanguard. Kalen spun around to face the navigation console. What do you mean lost tracking? Did they hit an orbital minefield? No, sir, the officer replied, his fingers flying across the controls. There were no explosions, no energy spikes. Their telemetry just ceased to exist. One moment the 3 scout cruisers were flying in perfect formation, and the next moment, the space they occupied was completely empty. A strange chill, an emotion that Kalen had not felt since his early days as a young soldier, crept up his spine. He looked back at the main view screen. Earth was still there, beautiful and silent, but the space around it now felt different. The light from the distant sun seemed a bit dimmer, and the stars around the planet seemed to be flickering in an irregular, unnatural pattern. Raise the shields to 100%, Kalen commanded, his voice loud and sharp. All ships drop out of cruise speed and adopt defensive formation Sigma. Scan that entire sector for stealth fields or hidden cloaking technology. The Vondrak fleet reacted with military precision. The heavy cruisers moved into a protective sphere around the flagship and the transport carriers, their powerful energy shields flaring to life in brilliant blue domes. The weapons arrays warmed up, ready to unleash devastating plasma fire at any target that dared to show itself. But there was nothing to shoot at. The scanners revealed absolutely nothing. The space between the moon and Earth was completely empty, save for a few pieces of human space junk and old satellites. Where are the scout ships? Kalen demanded, walking over to the sensor station. A ship cannot simply vanish without leaving an engine trail, a debris field, or a radiation leak. Find them. We are trying, Admiral Tross said, his usual calm demeanor cracking. The sensors are reporting that the space ahead of us has a mass density of 0. Yet the gravitational pull of the planet has suddenly increased by 4%. That is physically impossible. The planet's mass hasn't changed, but the gravity is pulling us in faster than our engines are pushing us forward. Engage reverse thrusters, Kalen ordered. Hold our position outside the lunar orbit until we understand what is happening. Reverse thrusters at maximum capacity, the propulsion officer shouted. The deck of the Vengeance vibrated violently as the massive ion engines fired at full power, trying to push the giant dreadnought away from the human world. But despite the thousands of tons of thrust pushing backwards, the ship's speed indicators did not drop. Instead, the numbers continued to climb, showing that the ship was still accelerating toward Earth. "We are not slowing down," Tross cried out, his upper hands gripping the edges of his console. "The reverse thrusters are operating at 120% efficiency, but we are being pulled toward the planet. The entire fleet is being pulled." Looking out the view screen, Kalen watched in horror as one of his heavy cruisers, a massive mile-long vessel of steel and shields, began to twist. The metal hull of the cruiser did not explode. It simply elongated, stretching out like a piece of soft clay. The blue energy shield around the cruiser distorted, turning a strange, sickly shade of purple before snapping out of existence. The entire ship was drawn forward into a point of pitch-black space that suddenly opened up directly in front of it. There was no sound, no flash of light. The cruiser was simply drawn into the black void, stretching until it was a thin silver line, and then it was gone. "What is that?" Kalen whispered, his eyes wide with a fear he had never known. "Is it a black hole? Did they activate a localized singularity? The sensors cannot read it." Tross screamed over the sound of the vibrating hull. "It has no radiation profile. It is not a black hole, it is a door. Something is opening space itself." Through the view screen, Kalen saw that the black point was expanding. It was no longer a single dot. It was a massive ring of absolute darkness that was rapidly rising up from the dark side of Earth's moon. It was large enough to swallow the entire fleet at once. "All ships execute emergency hyperspace jump," Kalen yelled into the fleet-wide communicator. "Abort the mission. Abort the invasion. Get us out of this system now. Hyperdrive cores are charging," the engineer reported over the comm system. "But the local space-time fabric is too warped. The drives cannot lock onto a destination vector. The universe around us is bending. Force the jump," Kalen commanded. "Do it now or we die." The hyperdrive core of the Vengeance let out a high-pitched scream that echoed through the metallic corridors of the ship. A flash of white light enveloped the vessel as the drive tried to tear open a hole into hyperspace to allow the ship to escape. For a single second, Kalen thought they had made it. The view of Earth blurred, and the familiar blue tunnel of hyperspace appeared on the screen. But the relief lasted only a moment. The blue tunnel did not hold. It began to twist, turning into a deep blood-red color. The walls of hyperspace, which should have been smooth and constant, began to warp and ripple like water. Then the red tunnel collapsed entirely. The Vengeance was thrown back into real space, but it was not the space they had left behind. They were no longer near the moon. They were in a low orbital path, directly above the dark side of Earth. The planet below them was not dark, however. The entire night side of the human world was glowing with millions of glowing white lines. They were not city lights. They were massive, geometric circuits carved into the very crust of the continents. The oceans were shimmering with a faint, iridescent bioluminescence that throbbed like a heartbeat. "The whole planet," Tross whispered, dropping to his lower knees. "The whole planet is a machine." Before anyone else could speak, the power on the Vengeance died completely. The bright fluorescent lights turned off, leaving the bridge in complete darkness, saved only by the eerie white and purple glow coming from the planet below through the massive view screen. The hum of the engines stopped. The life support systems went silent, leaving only the sound of the crew's heavy, panicked breathing. Kalen looked out into the void. The 200 heavy cruisers, the transport carriers, the supply ships, they were all floating there, dark and dead, caught in the tight gravitational grip of the world they had come to conquer. Then the human world spoke. It did not use radio waves. It did not use digital frequencies. The voice did not come through the dead speakers of the bridge. It echoed directly inside the minds of every Von Drac warrior in the fleet. It was a voice composed of a billion overlapping whispers, sounding both ancient and terrifyingly calm. "We told you to stay away," the voice whispered in their brains. "We built the beacon. We gave you the warning. We gave the universe a chance to leave us in peace." Kalen tried to speak, tried to scream a command to his men to fight, to draw their sidearms, to do anything, but his muscles were completely locked. He could not move a single claw. He could only look at the view screen. From the glowing surface of Earth, thousands of thin white tendrils of pure energy began to reach out into space. They looked like roots growing from a massive tree, moving slowly, gracefully, and unhindered through the vacuum. They approached the floating Vondrak ships, wrapping around the massive hulls with gentle precision. Where the energy tendrils touched the metal, the Vondrak hulls became transparent. Kalen could see into the interior of his own ship, seeing his soldiers frozen in place, their expressions filled with absolute terror. The physical material of the ship was being broken down into pure information, converted into light energy, and drawn downward toward the planet's surface. "What are you?" Kalen thought, his mind screaming the question into the void, hoping the entity would hear him. The billion whispers responded instantly, filling his consciousness with a cold, absolute certainty. "We are the monsters you feared in the dark. We are the ones who survived the birth of the cosmos. We broke our own world so we could never leave it, and we built a cage around our true nature. But you broke the seal." The white tendrils wrapped around the bridge of the vengeance. Kalen felt no pain. He felt only a strange, dizzying sensation of dissolution. He saw his hands begin to dissolve into tiny particles of glowing blue data, floating away into the air. Beside him, Tross was already gone, replaced by a pillar of soft fading light. He looked out the view screen one last time. The entire Vondrak armada, the greatest conquest force the Empire had ever assembled, was being pulled down into the glowing circuits of Earth. The ships were melting away like ice under a hot sun, their mass and energy being absorbed into the planet's immense global grid. Within minutes, the space above the human world was completely clear again. The white lines on the continents slowly dimmed, returning to the normal faint glow of human cities. The oceans stopped throbbing, and the stars returned to their fixed natural positions in the night sky. The deep silence of the void returned to the Sol system. On the outer boundary, 12,000 cycles away, the ancient titanium beacon continued to float in the cold dark, its automated system humming softly as it broadcast its eternal unheeded warning out into the lonely galaxy. "Do not enter. Do not exploit. Do not contact. They are never seen again." But there was no one left in the sector to hear it. The Vondrak fleet had crossed the line, and the universe would never find even a single piece of their wreckage. Deep within the core of the Galactic Council's primary station on the planet Citadel Prime, a quiet alarm began to chime. It was not a loud flashing siren that signaled an immediate physical attack. It was a low, steady pulse of amber light inside the Department of Cartography and Sector Stabilization. An analyst named Vryn, a slender, four-eyed being with long, delicate fingers perfect for sorting vast amounts of data, noticed the light. He paused his work and pulled up the telemetry map for the outer sectors of the Orion Arm. "That is strange," Vryn murmured to himself, his upper eyes blinking in confusion. "The Vondrak military signature has vanished." A senior supervisor walked past his desk, stopping when he noticed Vryn staring at the screen. "What do you mean vanished? Did their fleet enter a communication shadow behind a nebula?" "No, Supervisor," Vryn replied, bringing up the specific tracking log. Grand Admiral Kalas's fleet consisted of 254 vessels, including their command dreadnought. They entered Sector 44 Sol approximately 3 planetary rotations ago. Their signal strength was at maximum. Then 40 minutes ago, their tracking markers blinked out, not one by one as if they were engaged in combat, but all at once. The entire fleet register has dropped to 0. The supervisor's face paled, his skin changing from its natural blue tint to a dull, sickly gray. "Did you say Sol? The Crimson Sector?" "Yes, sir. The system with the ancient warning beacon." The supervisor stepped back, his hands trembling slightly. "Remove it from the screen. Delete the tracking log from the active queue and archive it under natural anomalies. Do not speak of this to the lower staff." "But Sir," Vryn protested, his lower eyes wide. "An entire Vondrak armada cannot just disappear. The Vondrak High Command will demand answers. They will want to know if they were attacked by a rival empire, or if their ships suffered a massive mechanical failure." "The Vondrak High Command can ask whatever they want," the supervisor said grimly, looking around to ensure no one else was listening. "But they will not go into that system to find out, and neither will we. The Council has a policy regarding Sol. We do not investigate, we do not rescue, and we do not remember. Every species that has ever ignored that beacon has met the exact same fate. They go in, the sector goes quiet, and they are never seen again. Now do your job and delete the log." Vryn did as he was told, his fingers tapping the commands to wipe the active tracking data. But his mind remained fixed on that dark, silent corner of the galaxy. He could not understand how a species as primitive as humanity, a race that had barely unlocked the secrets of basic fusion technology, could destroy a Vondrak fleet without leaving a single trace of cosmic debris. Meanwhile, back on Earth, The world appeared to have returned to its normal, chaotic routine. In a highly secure underground bunker beneath the mountains of the North American continent, a group of human leaders and military commanders sat around a large digital conference table. At the head of the table stood General Arthur Vance, a man with graying hair, sharp blue eyes, and a face lined by decades of heavy responsibility. He looked at the holographic display floating in the center of the room. The display showed a clean, empty map of the Sol system. There were no foreign ships on the screen. "Are we certain the containment field was absolute?" Vance asked, his voice calm but authoritative. A young woman in a clean white lab coat, Dr. Elena Rostova, tapped her data tablet. "The Planetary Defense Network performed perfectly, General. The moment the alien fleet crossed the lunar boundary, the global grid activated. We localized the spatial distortion to their exact coordinates. Every ship, every soldier, and every piece of foreign technology was successfully broken down and integrated into the primary subterranean core." "Did they manage to send any transmissions back to their homeworld?" an international delegate asked, leaning forward with an anxious expression. "If their leaders know what happened here, they might send an even larger force. We might face a total planetary war." "They sent nothing," Dr. Rostova answered with confidence. "The communication block was established 5 minutes before containment began." To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like the Vondrak fleet simply walked into a room and closed the door behind them. Their home planet will see nothing but a complete loss of signal. General Vance nodded slowly, placing his large hands on the edge of the table. "Good. We cannot afford to let the galaxy know what we are hiding down here. Humanity has worked for 300 years to build this illusion of weakness. If the greater galactic community realizes that Earth is not a primitive dirtball, but the outer shell of a Type 3 planetary engine, they will unite against us out of pure fear." "The energy harvest from the Vondrak ships was significant, Doctor," Rostova continued, changing the hologram to show a massive subterranean structure that stretched thousands of miles beneath the Earth's crust. It was a complex web of glowing energy pathways, enormous fusion reactors, and strange, ancient alien architecture that humanity had discovered, buried deep within the planet during the late 21st century. The dark matter engines of their dreadnought provided enough raw power to stabilize our core stabilizers for another 50 years. We also managed to catalog their entire military database during the dissolution process. "What did you find?" Vance asked. "They are called the Vondrak," Rostova explained, displaying a digital image of the tall armored alien warriors. "They are an aggressive, expansionist empire. They have conquered dozens of worlds, enslaving the local populations and strip mining their planets for resources. They chose us because they thought we were weak, divided, and unable to defend ourselves. They ignored the council warning because they believed their technology made them gods." Vance let out a dry, humorless laugh. "They didn't realize the warning wasn't written by the council to protect us from them. It was written by an ancient, dying race to protect the rest of the universe from what we would do if we were disturbed." The room fell into a heavy silence. The true history of Earth was a secret known only to a tiny fraction of the human population. The public believed they were living on a normal planet, dealing with normal geopolitical problems, like shifts, and slow technological progress. They did not know that their entire world was a massive, ancient fortress, a remnant of a cosmic war that took place long before the first human cities were ever built. Humanity was not native to Earth. They were the descendants of a warrior race that had fought a terrible war against an ancient, devouring entity billions of years ago. To survive, their ancestors had hidden inside the hollowed-out shell of a massive artificial world, Earth, and had intentionally suppressed their own technology, memory, and history, entering a long sleep of evolution to hide from their enemies. They had become simple, biological creatures, starting from scratch, while the ancient machine beneath their feet slept, waiting for the day it would be needed again. "The core is stable then?" Vance asked, breaking the silence. "For now," Rostova said, "but the Vondrak are a persistent species. When their fleet fails to return, their emperor will eventually send scouts to investigate the last known location of their armada. They won't come with an invasion force next time. They will come with stealth ships, or they might hire mercenary corporate factions to do the dirty work for them. The illusion of our primitive nature will become harder to maintain if we have to keep activating the planetary engine." "Then we strengthen the illusion," Vance said firmly. "We let our space agencies continue their public missions. Let them launch primitive chemical rockets. Let them build small, clunky space stations. Let the galaxy see a species that is struggling to leave its own atmosphere. The more foolish and weak we look, the safer we are. And if another fleet ignores the warning, the delegate asked. Vance looked at the empty space where the Vondrak fleet had once been. Then the planet will eat them too. We do what we must to survive. We did not ask for this empire to come here. We did not invite them to take our home. They chose to step across the line, and they paid the price for their arrogance. Keep the defense network on low standby. Dismissed. As the leaders left the room, Dr. Rostova remained behind, staring at the holographic model of the planet. She traced her fingers along the glowing lines that represented the subterranean machine. It was a beautiful, terrifying piece of technology, capable of bending space, absorbing matter, and shielding an entire star system from outside eyes. But she knew that every time they activated the machine, a small piece of humanity's ancient, aggressive nature woke up with it. The whispers that the Vondrak had heard in their minds during their final moments were not a pre-recorded message. They were the collective, subconscious thoughts of 8 billion humans, amplified by the planetary core. Humanity was a sleeping giant, dreaming a dream of peace and primitive innocence. But beneath that dream lay an ancient, terrifying power that was waiting for a reason to wake up completely. And if the galaxy kept pushing, that giant would eventually open its eyes, stretch its limbs, and step out into the stars once more. The disappearance of Grand Admiral Kalen's fleet did not remain a secret within the Vondrak Empire for long. In the grand capital city of Vondrak Prime, a metropolis of towering black spires and glowing plasma rivers, Emperor Malachor sat upon his obsidian throne. His primary eyes burned with a cold, furious intensity as he looked down at his high ministers. 250 ships, Malachor rumbled, his voice shaking the stone walls of the throne room. The pride of our southern expansion vector, gone. No distress signals, no debris fields, no survivors. How does an entire armada vanish into thin air while investigating a primitive dirt world? The Grand Scholar of the Empire, an elderly Vondrak with faded gray scales and a cybernetic eye implant, stepped forward, bowing low. Your Majesty, our long-range stellar telescopes have monitored the Sol system continuously since the loss of signal. There are no signs of high-energy warfare, no radiation remnants that would indicate a large-scale engagement. The planet Earth remains exactly as it was, a primitive world with low-level industrial activity. Then what happened to my ship, Scholar? Malachor demanded, slamming one of his heavy lower fists onto the armrest of his throne. The Galactic Council archives contain similar entries from ancient times, sire, the scholar explained hesitantly. Several civilizations during the early stellar cycles attempted to enter that system. A Krellian mining fleet, a Valari trade syndicate, even a scout detachment of the ancient precursors. All of them entered the sector, and none of them ever returned. The Counts placed the warning beacon there because they concluded that the system contains an unstable spatial anomaly that destroys any advanced technology that comes near it. Malachor let out a sharp, mocking hiss. An anomaly? You expect me to believe that a random tier in space-time selectively destroys military fleets while allowing primitive human satellites to float around in perfect safety? That is absurd. The humans are hiding something. They have a weapon, or they are protected by someone who wishes to keep us out of that sector. The human technology level is incapable of creating such a weapon, sire, the military minister added. Our intelligence indicates they are still using fossil fuels and primitive digital networks. They have no concept of faster-than-light travel or shield mechanics. Then we will find out the truth without sending another fleet into their trap, the Emperor declared, his eyes narrowing. We will not use Vondrak ships. We will employ the services of the Shadow Guild. Contact the mercenary Captain Jax. Tell him I want eyes on the surface of that planet. I want to know exactly what happens when a ship approaches that world under total stealth. 2 planetary rotations later, a small, sleek vessel drifted silently through the outer edges of the Sol system. The ship was called the Phantom, and it was unlike any military cruiser in the galaxy. It possessed no heavy shields or massive plasma cannons. Instead, its entire hull was constructed from a rare, light-absorbent material that rendered it completely invisible to both visual sight and advanced electronic scanners. Its engines produced zero thermal signature, leaving no trail in the cold void. Captain Jax, a member of the insectoid mantis race, stood at the small console of his bridge. His long, thin antennae twitched as he monitored the distant blue planet. Jax was a professional. He had spent his life infiltrating restricted sectors, stealing corporate secrets, and exploring forbidden worlds for the highest bidder. He did not care about council warnings or imperial pride. He cared only about the massive payload of raw platinum credits the Vondrak Emperor had promised him. Approaching the outer boundary, his pilot reported, her voice a series of low clicks and whistles. The ancient council beacon is broadcasting to our left. Our stealth systems are functioning at 99% efficiency. The beacon's automated sensors have not detected our presence. Keep our speed low, Jax ordered, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the green light of his monitors. We are not here to fight. We are here to watch and listen. If there is a weapon or an anomaly, I want our passive scanners to record its energy signature before it can target us. We get in, we drop a network of micro-spies into their atmosphere, and we get out. The Phantom glided past the orbit of Jupiter, moving like a ghost through the shadow of the giant planet's moons. Jax monitored the human radio channels. Just as the previous reports had stated, the planet was filled with open, chaotic noise. Humans were talking about local politics, entertainment, and weather. It seemed completely normal, completely primitive. No signs of military readiness, Jax noted, recording his observations into his data log. The inhabitants are completely unaware of our approach. If there is a trap here, it is not an automated system controlled by the locals. As the stealth ship closed the distance to Earth, passing the orbit of Mars, Jax noted something strange on his passive sensor array. The space around the planet looked completely clear, but the background radiation of the universe, the faint hum left behind by the birth of the galaxy, was missing in a perfect sphere around the human world. It was as if something was absorbing the very fabric of space-time, leaving a pocket of absolute nothingness. "Captain," the pilot whispered, her antennae dropping in fear. "The gravity wells are shifting. The scanners are showing that we are entering a high-density zone, but there is no matter in front of us." "Maintain stealth," Jack said, his voice dropping. "Do not alter our course. We are too small and too quiet for them to notice." But Jax was wrong. In the underground bunker beneath the mountains of Earth, Dr. Elena Rostova was looking at a high-resolution terminal. The screen did not show a radar blip or an energy spike. It showed a small, localized ripple in the planet's gravitational field. "General Vance," she said, calling the commander over to her station. "We have a visitor." Vance looked at the screen, his eyebrows drawing together. "An alien ship. I thought the Vondrak would have learned their lesson." "It's not a Vondrak military ship," Rostova explained, zooming in on the gravitational ripple. "The mass signature is too small, and it has no thermal or electromagnetic output. It's a dedicated stealth vessel, most likely a spy ship or a mercenary contractor sent to investigate what happened to the fleet." "Can the planetary engine absorb it without activating the full global grid?" Vance asked. "If we light up the continents again, any telescope in the nearby sectors will see the energy flash." "We don't need the global grid for a target this small," Rostova replied, her fingers moving across the control panel. "The core has a localized collection vector. We can open a microsingularity directly in their flight path. It will look like a microscopic gravitational anomaly to anyone watching from the outside. The ship will be drawn into the subterranean core before they even realize they've been detected." Vance nodded. "Do it quickly. We can't let them drop any surveillance devices into our atmosphere." On board the Phantom, Captain Jax felt a sudden, violent vibration pass through his ship. It was not a mechanical failure. It was the feeling of his own body becoming heavier, as if the gravity inside the cabin had suddenly multiplied by 10. "Report," Jax shouted, trying to reach his console, but his limbs felt like lead. "The space ahead," the pilot screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "It's opening. A microgravity well has locked onto our hull. It bypassed our stealth systems completely. It's pulling us down." Jax looked out the front view screen. The beautiful blue and white planet Earth was suddenly gone. In its place was a swirling vortex of pure violet energy that seemed to have opened up in the middle of empty space. The Phantom, despite its advanced cloaking material and silent engines, was being drawn into the vortex like a leaf in a whirlpool. "Engage emergency thrusters," Jax ordered, his eyes wide with panic. "Abort stealth. Give me full power to the main engines." The stealth systems deactivated as the ship's engines flared to life, desperate to break free from the gravitational pull. But it was entirely useless. The violet vortex was not just pulling the ship, it was pulling space itself. The distance between the Phantom and the vortex did not close linearly. The space between them simply shrunk until the ship was right on the edge of the violet light. "We are losing structural integrity," the pilot cried out as the metal walls of the bridge began to groan and buckle. Jax watched in utter disbelief as the passive scanners, which had been recording the energy profile of the vortex, suddenly displayed a line of text on his screen. It was not in a galactic language. It was written in simple, basic English, translated automatically by his ship's computer from a localized signal broadcast directly into their systems. "Curiosity killed the cat." "What does that mean?" Jax whispered, his mind racing as the violet light enveloped the bridge. "What is a cat?" He never received an answer. The Phantom was drawn into the microsingularity, its entire mass crushed down into a single point of data and pulled deep into the Earth's subterranean core. The vortex snapped shut a millisecond later, leaving the space near the planet completely empty once again. Back on Vondrak Prime, Emperor Malachor waited for hours, then days, then weeks. The Shadow Guild reported that Captain Jax's ship had crossed the Sol boundary and had simply vanished from their long-range quantum relay trackers. There were no debris fields, no final messages, and no signs of life. The mercenary captain, his crew, and his advanced stealth ship had gone into human territory and were never seen again. For the first time in his life, Emperor Malachor felt a cold knot of dread form in the center of his chest. He looked out at his vast empire, realizing that there was something out there in the dark that his armies could not conquer. Something that devoured everything that dared to look at it. The disappearance of the Vondrak fleet and the mercenary spy ship could not be hidden from the Galactic Council forever. Whispers began to spread through the corridors of Citadel Prime. Species from across the galaxy spoke in hushed tones about Sector 44 Sol, the forbidden territory where ships vanished without a trace. Some claimed it was a cursed region of space, inhabited by ancient ghosts. Others believed that a massive cosmic predator had nested near the solar system, devouring anything that came near. The High Council, determined to maintain order and prevent panic among the stellar empires, called an emergency closed-door session. Representatives from the most powerful civilizations gathered in the grand amphitheater, their faces clouded with concern. At the center of the chamber stood Counselor Theron, a wise and ancient being of the Elari race, known for their long lifespans and deep knowledge of cosmic history. He raised his hands to silence the murmuring crowd. "We are here today to discuss the ongoing instability in the Sol sector," Theron announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "As many of you know, the Vondrak Empire recently lost a significant portion of its military forces within that sector. Furthermore, independent reconnaissance vessels have also vanished. The Vondrak High Command is demanding that the Council take military action to investigate this threat." The Vondrak representative, a large general with battle-scared armor, stood up and roared, "We demand an armed expedition. If there is a hostile force hiding behind that warning beacon, they must be destroyed. The Vondrak do not tolerate threats to our expansion." Counselor Theron looked at the Vondrak general with a look of profound pity. "General, you believe you are dealing with a standard military opponent. You believe that if you send enough ships and enough plasma cannons, you can conquer any foe. You are wrong. You do not understand what is truly inside that system." "Then tell us, Counselor," a representative from another system called out. "What is the true nature of Earth? Why did our ancestors place a crimson warning beacon around a planet of primitives?" Theron tapped his data console, and a large holographic display filled the center of the amphitheater. It showed a historical archive that dated back billions of years, long before the Galactic Council was even formed. "Billions of cycles ago," Theron began, his voice dropping into a solemn tone, "the galaxy was ruled by a race known as the Architects. They possessed technology that could create stars, reshape planets, and manipulate the very laws of physics. They were a peaceful race, dedicated to the preservation of life. But they were not alone." The hologram shifted to show a dark, terrifying image of a war that spanned across thousands of star systems. A faction of the Architects broke away, choosing to use their power for destruction and conquest. They engineered a specialized biological weapon, a race of immortal, highly adaptable warriors designed for absolute warfare. These warriors possessed an unstable genetic makeup that allowed them to evolve instantly to counter any weapon, any environment, and any threat. They felt no fear, no hesitation, and no mercy. They were called humanity. The chamber went completely silent. Every representative stared at the hologram in disbelief. "The human legions devastated the galaxy," Theron continued. "They wiped out entire civilizations in a matter of cycles. But their creators realized too late that humanity was too dangerous to control. The humans turned on the Architects themselves, breaking their empire into pieces. In a desperate act of self-preservation, the remaining Architects used their final resources to trap the human legions on a single, massive artificial prison world, a world disguised as a natural planet, located in a remote, isolated sector of space. That world is Earth. If they are so dangerous, why did they not escape?" the Vondrak general asked, his voice shaking slightly. "Because the prison was perfect," Theron explained. "The Architects built a massive machine within the core of the planet that placed the human race into a permanent state of collective amnesia and biological suppression. It reduced their lifespans, locked away their ancient technology, and forced them to evolve backward into simple, primitive creatures. For millions of years, the humans lived on that world. completely unaware of their true identity. They believed they were native to the dirt, fighting small, meaningless wars among themselves, while the machine kept them asleep. But the machine requires energy to maintain the suppression field, Theron warned, looking around the room, and it is designed with a specific defense protocol. If an outside force approaches the planet with advanced technology, the machine automatically absorbs that technology, converting its mass and energy into power to keep the human race asleep. The Vondrak fleet was not destroyed by a human weapon. They were consumed by the prison itself, turned into fuel to keep the cage locked. Then we are safe, the Vondrak general sighed with relief. As long as we stay away, the humans will remain primitive and asleep. No, Theron said, his expression turning grim. We are not safe. The Vondrak fleet was too large. The amount of energy absorbed from your dreadnoughts and dark matter engines was immense. It overloaded the prison's storage capacity. Our long-range sensors indicate that the suppression field is beginning to degrade. The human race is starting to remember who they are. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, inside the secret military bunker, Dr. Elena Rostova was experiencing this reality firsthand. She stood before a giant glass window, looking down into the massive cavern that housed the planetary engine. The core was no longer glowing with its usual calm violet light. It was pulsing with a violent golden energy that illuminated the entire subterranean world. Beside her, General Vance was holding his head in his hands, his face twisted in pain. Elena, the noises, the whispers in my head, they're getting louder. I can hear. I can see things that didn't happen to me. I can see stars burning. I can see fleets of gold and silver ships shattering under my command. What is happening to us? Dr. Rostova turned to look at him, her own eyes glowing with a faint golden hue. Her voice sounded different, deeper, and filled with an ancient power. The illusion is breaking, General. The energy from the alien ships didn't just power the core. It woke it up completely. The prison machine is failing to contain our true genetic data. The human race is waking up from the long sleep. Across the entire globe, millions of humans were experiencing the same phenomenon. People in cities, villages, and fields were stopping in their tracks, their eyes turning toward the sky as ancient memories rushed into their minds. They remembered how to manipulate gravity. They remembered how to build starships from light. They remembered their true name, their true heritage, and the war they had fought against the creators of the universe. The small, clunky space stations and chemical rockets that humanity had built were no longer needed. The illusion of a primitive, divided species was gone in an instant. The borders between nations vanished as the collective consciousness of 8 billion humans united into a single, unstoppable mind. General Vance, Dr. Rostova said, her hands moving across the controls with a speed that no normal human could achieve. The planetary engine is no longer operating as a cage. It has converted itself into its original configuration. It is a Class 4 stellar dreadnought. The entire planet Earth is ready to move. Vance stood up straight, his pain completely gone, replaced by a cold, absolute clarity. His eyes burned with the golden light of an ancient warrior race. He looked up at the ceiling of the bunker, seeing past the rock and dirt, out into the deep void of space where the Galactic Council was waiting. They kept us in the dark for millions of years, Vance said, his voice echoing through the bunker. They turned us into primitives and watched us struggle on this rock while they enjoyed the stars. It is time to let the galaxy know that the prison doors are officially open. With a single thought from the united human consciousness, the planetary engine engaged. On the surface of Earth, the oceans parted, and the ground shook as massive golden thruster arrays rose from the depths of the crust. The planet did not break apart. Its structural integrity was maintained by a flawless gravitational shield. The pale blue dot began to move, accelerating through the Sol system with impossible speed, heading directly toward the outer boundary where the ancient warning beacon floated. The warning was no longer meant for the outside universe. The monsters had broken free, and they were bringing their cage with them. On Citadel Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was thrown into absolute chaos as the sensor arrays began to scream with unprecedented warnings. The large holographic map in the center of the amphitheater, which had shown the Sol system as a quiet, dark corner of the galaxy, was now flashing with a brilliant, blinding gold light. Counselor Theron, the navigation officer, shouted, his voice filled with pure panic. The spatial anomaly in the Sol sector, it is moving. The mass signature of the third planet has broken orbit. Theron gripped the edge of his podium, his ancient eyes wide with horror. What do you mean it has broken orbit? A planet cannot change its trajectory through space-time without destroying itself. It isn't destroying itself, sir, the officer cried out, displaying the real-time telemetry data. It is accelerating. It has bypassed the outer gas giants. It has just passed the boundary beacon. The planet Earth is traveling at 70 times the speed of light, using a localized gravitational fold. It is heading directly for our sector. The Vondrak general slammed his fists against the table, his bravado completely shattered. Deploy the home fleet. Assemble every battle cruiser from every empire. We must establish a blockade before that monstrosity reaches our borders. A blockade against a planet, Theron whispered, his voice trembling. You cannot shoot down a world, General. Especially not a world inhabited by the ones who broke the architects. Within 3 planetary rotations, the human world arrived at the outer boundary of the Council's central sector. The sky above Citadel Prime, which was usually filled with the peaceful traffic of trade ships and luxury liners, suddenly went dark. A massive, spherical shadow blocked out the light of the local twin suns. The inhabitants of the capital planet looked up in absolute terror. Floating in low orbit was a massive rocky planet, covered in blue oceans and white clouds. But its underside was a glowing network of golden engines that throbbed with the power of 1,000 exploding stars. Earth had arrived at their doorstep. Surrounding the human planet were tens of thousands of smaller golden vessels that had been constructed from the raw materials of Earth's own moon during their 3-day journey. These ships were sleek, fast, and armed with technologies that the galaxy had not seen since the first era of the universe. The Galactic Council's home fleet, consisting of 5,000 heavy battle cruisers, moved into a defensive formation between Citadel Prime and the human world. Their weapons were charged. Their shields were raised to maximum capacity. But every captain on every ship knew they were completely outmatched. They were trying to fight an entire ecosystem. On the bridge of the human flagship, which had materialized from the planetary core, General Arthur Vance stood alongside Dr. Elena Rostova. They were no longer dressed in modern human military uniforms or lab coats. They wore the sleek golden armor of their ancient ancestors, the human legions of old. Their eyes glowed with the eternal light of a species that had conquered its own limitations. The alien fleet has established a line of defense, General, Dr. Rostova reported, her mind connected directly to the ship's targeting array. They are broadcasting a demand for our immediate retreat. They claim we are violating galactic law. Vance let out a soft, cold laugh. Galactic law, the law written by the cowards who locked us in a cage for 3 million cycles. Ignore their broadcast. Open a channel to every sentient being in this sector. Let them see who has returned. With a single thought, a communication signal bypassed every firewall, every encryption, and every defense system on Citadel Prime and its surrounding ships. The face of General Vance appeared on every view screen, every digital billboard, and every personal data tablet across the entire capital sector. Members of the Galactic Council, Vance said, his voice calm, clear, and terrifyingly powerful. For millions of years, you left us to die on a small, violent rock. You watched our history unfold through lines of blood and suffering. You kept us small, you kept us weak, and you ignored our existence unless you wanted to use our world as a garbage bin for your broken technology. You ignored the warnings about our true nature because you thought your prison would hold forever. The entire sector held its breath as the human general stepped forward, his eyes locking onto the screens. The prison is officially closed, Vance announced. The human race has remembered its name. We did not come here to destroy your worlds or to enslave your populations. We are not the monsters your ancestors made us out of fear. But we will not be contained any longer. The galaxy will be reshaped, and humanity will take its rightful place among the stars. Lower your shields and surrender your military fleets immediately. If you choose to fight, we will show why your creators feared the day we would wake up. The Vondrak general on Citadel Prime, refusing to accept total defeat, screamed into his fleet communicator, "Fire! Fire all weapons! Destroy their flagship! Burn their world!" 1,000 Vondrak and Council cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Brilliant beams of plasma, antimatter torpedoes, and heavy particle lasers rushed through the void, heading directly for Earth and its golden fleet. The energy output was enough to crack a small moon into pieces, but the human world did not even attempt to dodge. As the destructive energy drew near, the golden circuits on Earth's continents flared to life. A massive global gravitational shield expanded from the planet's surface, forming a perfect mirror of pure spatial force. The alien weapons hit the shield and vanished. The energy was not absorbed this time. It was simply turned backward. The plasma beams, the antimatter torpedoes, and the lasers reflected off the human shield with absolute precision, rushing back toward the ships that had fired them. The vacuum of space filled with a brilliant, silent explosion as hundreds of Council cruisers were torn apart by their own weapons. The reflected energy ripped through their shields, melted their hulls, and shattered their power cores in a matter of seconds. The remaining ships, seeing the absolute futility of the attack, immediately cut their engines and dropped their shields in total surrender. Within minutes, the greatest military force the Council had ever assembled was completely neutralized without the human fleet firing a single shot. Councillor Theron sat down on the floor of the grand amphitheater, his hands covering his face as tears streamed down his cheeks. He knew that the era of the Galactic Council was over. The universe now belonged to humanity once more. Earth remained floating in the sky above Citadel Prime, a beautiful, terrifying reminder of what happens when the warnings of the past are ignored. The ancient titanium beacon that had floated on the edge of the Sol system for 12,000 cycles was gone, crushed into dust by the passing of the human world. The warning was no longer necessary. The universe now knew exactly what lay beyond the border, and they knew that anyone who dared to threaten human territory would never be seen again. Humanity had broken its chains, and the stars would never be silent again.